Well, I'm standing outside Auckland War Memorial Museum, this majestic old building. Well, it's nearly 100 years old, actually. I'm at the north end of the building, the original entranceway, and this place is closed because of a huge asbestos problem. There are a couple of trucks out the front with some scaffolding. You can hear a bit of noise going on inside, but nobody is allowed in there except for the workers, the specialists in their PPE gear, all clad in white. I'm Sharon Brett-Kelly, and today on The Detail I find out what this is about and the impact of it on the museum, on its plans for its centenary celebrations in a few years' time. And I'm going to contrast that with what's going on at the St James Theatre just down the road of Queen Street. It's received millions in public funding to restore it, to finally restore it. I'm walking around the other side of the museum to talk to the Chief Executive, David Reeves. And it is a completely different scene.
It feels like a bit of a Jekyll and Hyde experience, because out the south it's vibrant and exciting and people are coming in out of the cold and enjoying the diva show that we've just been through. And then the north is like that sort of dystopian sort of no-go zone of industrial pumps and tubes and PPE gear. That's quite a dissonant experience.
David, we're here to talk about this big asbestos problem that the museum has got.
Yeah, it's a pretty unwelcome situation that we've found ourselves in, and it's certainly something I've had to quickly learn a lot about asbestos and the regulations and what we need to do. But unfortunately it's also having a bit of a longer term impact on our visitation and finances and so forth. But but we're open.
Yes,
yeah,
well, and that's your message, isn't it? Here we are in the foyer.
We've got school groups arriving. One lot's just zoomed through once they've found themselves, and they're off to have their classes and lessons in the museum. Cafe's thriving. We're on the go. So it's sort of, I've been describing it as like we're back at work, but we've got one arm in a sling.
That's right, and you're saying it's thriving, but you're losing millions because of this problem, and also some of those key exhibits like the volcano zone, like the Māori Court, are closed.
That's right.
So they must be having a huge impact.
So we're getting to reopen at some point in October. Most of the galleries in the north of the building again. We've got teams working really hard at the moment to do what they need to do under the regulations to make sure that they're safe. The space that is trickier is the Māori Court, because it's up in the ceiling that's the source of the asbestos that we found. So that is going to take a bit longer, and we don't yet know what the time frame is on that.
How did all this happen?
Well, buildings of this age commonly have asbestos. It was a very useful building material. And during the 1980s and 1990s, there was a big effort done to take most of the asbestos out. We are coming up to 100 years old, this magnificent building on Pukekohe in Auckland Domain. And the board and I have been thinking about how do we want to mark that centenary. And so we started doing a bit of scoping into the infrastructure of the building, and that's when we went up into the ceiling void and discovered the remnants of that last asbestos removal, which was loose dust.
You didn't suspect there might be something like this?
We've got an asbestos management plan, as all public buildings are required to have, and it does identify asbestos in certain areas and where it's been dealt with in the past, but this was an area that we didn't know about. And in a building as old and complex as this, it's not really surprising that these things come to light when you go looking.
And what does it look like? I mean, when you come across
they're
it?
microscopic fibres sitting in dust.
Sitting in dust.
Yeah,
and whereabouts?
So
in the ceiling?
In the void above the ceiling. So the Māori Court, for those who know it, has got a glass skylight, and then there's a void above that, which is where the light, and there's also wiring and air conditioning and building services in that area. And initially, it was not an area that the public ever get to access. In fact, the staff hardly ever get to access it. And so we were working very cautiously to identify it, work out what the management plan was, and do concentric testing out from the source just to see how far it had spread. And something changed, we don't know what, and we probably never will, and we started to discover fibres actually in some of the public areas. Now, the other thing to point out at this point is that we also, right from the outset, were doing air quality testing, and we've done nearly 2,000 tests over the last few months, and not one of them has come above the WorkSafe limit for occupation.
How did you actually discover these particles?
So it's a testing method where they swab test the surfaces and then they send them away to the lab.
It's a regular process.
Who do microscopic examination. How it spread, we just don't know. All buildings of this size have smoke extract systems, so when fire alarms go off, they sound like hurricanes. The fans go off, and it's designed to make the building safe and take the smoke out so that people can evacuate safely. It's possible that huge air disturbance is what has pulled some of the asbestos fibres into areas that they didn't originate.
So there's a lot of things that you don't know about this issue now, but
we're learning more and more. And we're zeroing in, and we've got 2/3 of the building open again after just 3 weeks.
You closed the museum, for 3 weeks, fully closed.
Right. And what again, there's a whole lot of layers to this, which is sort of at one time interesting, but also really mundane and irritating. That once we've found a few positive tests for asbestos in the grand foyer at the north of the building, that's one of our primary fire evacuation routes. And so that meant that our fire evacuation scheme was no longer valid because that was closed off, and anybody in that area, if they had been, would have to be forced through the area which we'd closed because the asbestos as a routine fire exit. So we had to close the building, deal with the asbestos as best we could in most of the building, but also had to revalidate and resubmit our fire evacuation plan for the whole building, not using that north foyer.
Now, as David explains the complexities of dealing with this deadly dust in such a precious old building, there's a steady stream of visitors going into the new Diva exhibition, a show full of glittery, over-the-top costumes of many of our entertainment superstars. Normally, at this time of the year, there would be 18,000 visits per week. In June, it was nearly half that. In July, there was some improvement, but still 35% lower than expectations.
And here we are with Elton
Here we are
John's.
with Elton John's confection that he apparently it was too large for him to drive to his birthday party in a car, so he had to hire a truck, and he was driven through London in the truck, being fanned as he went.
Let's describe it. I mean, he's got the platform shoes for sure.
It's Louis XIV, basically. It was the designer's inspiration.
But as we follow the line out of the Diva show, David reveals another complication that will keep the big draw card to overseas visitors, the Māori court, closed for who knows how long.
The Māori court has a curved ceiling, a good half of it is glass, and above that is a roof which is also curved and has peculiar geometric shapes, and the spaces are too small, most of them, for people to get into, and so it means removal of the asbestos is really quite tricky, and the engineers and consultants have been working with us on what we can do. They've eliminated the possibility of taking the roof off to extract it from above.
Why?
Because Auckland's climate doesn't support taking the roof off a precious museum like this. So what that means is that we have to probably remove it from underneath, which is looking like perhaps dismantling the ceiling of the Māori court in sections, then basically rebuilding the ceiling. It's a heritage ceiling, it's got ornate plasterwork, and of course it's got highly valuable, highly precious taonga sitting underneath. And so we have to move all of those taonga out of the way so that we can work above. Those taonga themselves, some of them have got asbestos dust on them. So we've had to train our own staff to how to deal with that in accordance with the regulations. So it's like an octopus with more than 8 tentacles, but we're paring it back and we'll get there. Unfortunately, at great cost.
Yeah, how much?
We don't know the full cost yet. We've spent getting up to about 1.8 million so far, but it's going to keep rising, unfortunately. And that's on top of the lost revenue as well.
And so where does the money come from? I mean, about a $2 million loss in revenue you've estimated.
Yeah, so we're doing everything we can to trim our costs and looking at paring back activities over the coming year, because there is no bucket of money that we can just dip into. There's no money tree out in the domain. We can just go and pick some more leaves and pay for it. So it's a pretty serious matter. And over the last few years, we've spent down our reserves. We've redeveloped the building. Yeah, it's a tricky situation, and the museum board are really quite concerned about it.
Because of this work that you have to now do and your plans for celebrating 100 years, does that change what your plans are?
Yeah, so what we're doing between now and December is gathering a whole lot of information about the fundraising environment, around the condition of the building, and we'll assemble all of that for the Trust Board to consider, because the 2029 centenary is a fixed date. We'd certainly want to do something then, but it might also be that we have a centenary year or that we have a centenary campaign that just rolls out over a period of time.
Did you have an amount set aside?
Not set aside. We've had an initial ballpark figure of $30 to $40 million that we need to raise. Buildings like this are not cheap, but it's much loved by Aucklanders, and we sort of figured that for its 100th birthday we should do a proper job, and would include restoring some of the heritage features as well, which have been compromised a little bit over the years. So returning the Māori Court in particular back to how it looked from a building point of view on opening day in 1929.
But will you still be spending 30 to 40 million?
We hope to, but this is the decision that we need to make, and it depends a little bit on the progress we're able to make with the asbestos, and also obviously fundraising. But I've got a hunch that actually, in the same way that Aucklanders themselves fundraised to build the building in the first place in the 1920s, I'm hoping that in the 2020s that it's something that people will get behind to really make it a building that we can all be proud of for the second century on Pukekawa.
Are jobs on the line with all this going on?
I don't believe so at the moment, but if it goes on, that's not out of the question, sadly.
What kind of threat is asbestos to the artefacts themselves?
As I understand it, very little. What it does is it impairs our use of the artefacts. So if there's asbestos sitting on them, then we can't use them normally. So they're damaged in a way, but it's damaged in our utility rather than physical or chemical damage.
And when you say, you've coached the staff into how to handle
Yes,
these.
so we've got a dedicated team of collections staff who've been through the rigorous training to have asbestos awareness, but also all of the PPE gear and the protocols around cleaning and showering and going through airlocks and all of that sort of thing. So,
are you happy, and is the council happy and the board happy with the process of checking this asbestos? I mean, I guess what I'm asking you is, have there been failings along the way?
We believe we've done everything we should have, and we've certainly acted really quickly, because we've got a huge responsibility with such a loved public building that is open to people to come, every day of the week. So we were not over-cautious, but we were appropriately cautious in closing quickly, doing as much testing as we possibly could, work to prioritise getting most of the building reopened. One possibility was it just paralyses the building for years, and that would clearly be unsatisfactory on lots of fronts. So
disastrous. Well, I'm at St James Theatre now, just off Queen Street. It's actually between Queen Street and the Auckland Library. This site's been an eyesore for years, but next month restoration work will start after $30 million in public money was confirmed quite recently. I'm off to talk to Newsroom's co-editor Tim Murphy about the mixed fortunes of both these old buildings.
It's a terrible thing that the museum board and executives have been handed, though. They've been all of a sudden, out of nowhere, almost crippled in their business and their vision for the museum by asbestos dust, as it turns out, that is the byproduct of a poorly done renovation of decades ago, where material was just kind of left behind and is now has the potential to pollute and endanger people. So out of nowhere, the museum was kind of going along okay, had a pretty clear vision, working on future funding with Auckland Council, and then bang, you close completely, and now they're sort of half hobbled.
Are they getting the support that they need from the council on this?
Well, they get their funding continued. So the council puts in 34 million or something a year. It's compelled to by a statute that says the council will fund it. And so that the council's always resented that they don't have any flexibility, really, that they're compelled. So they always try and influence what the museum board does and with the appointments, but also the attempts at controlling funding. However, their money continues, their funding continues, so that the museum, while it will lose its revenue from people visiting, foreigners who pay, but also people who spend at the cafe and the car parking and the way they raise their money. That'll all go down in the meantime. The council money is still there. The council's offered openly to lend its expertise in any way they need. So I think they've sort of handed them the chance. But I think that'll all look, as everything in New Zealand does, towards Wellington and the government and taxpayers to kind of probably stump up some sort of bailout for this.
Quite an interesting contrast to another old building, another historic building in Auckland, St James Theatre, which has just got, is it guaranteed, millions of dollars in central government and local government funding for its restoration.
Yeah, it is a total contrast. They both turn 100 within a couple of years. The St James is in 2028 and the museum in 2029. Back in that era when we built good, lasting treasures. But yeah, it's a total contrast in that one has been derelict for more than a decade and lots of doubts about whether we'd ever see it restored or come back, or whether it just remain as it is or be demolished. So the St James is finally to the point where renovations will begin, and that beautiful old theatre that 3 times hosted Queen Elizabeth on her royal visits and was a fantastic centrepiece for performance, music, theatre and productions and cinema for years and generations, will be restored. They got money just in the last few weeks, finally landed from the government into the Auckland Council's bank account, and that will then feed out that money. It's about almost up to 50 million to fix the St James, and it's about a third each from the owner, which is a trust, who are kind of doing it philanthropically, the council and the central government.
And is it definitely going to go ahead? Because it's been so on again, off again, the restoration, hasn't it? I mean, it's been this ugly hole in the ground for a long time.
Well, all indications are that it can now. The money's landed. The 25 or so conditions that the council had put on the developer owner, the trust, saying you've got to be able to satisfy us, that you have spent this, that you have prepared that you're going to provide quantity surveying details. A very long list have all been either satisfied or completed. So the developer says, yep, on sort of mid-September, we'll be there starting this work of restoring this old jewel.
Kind of an interesting time to be getting all this money too, considering we're told that there's no money for this, for that, and yet there is money for this old building. Well, the money isn't brand new. The council decided to give it in 2016 under mayor before this. They decided to stump up 15 million if the government would do so as well.
The government took until 2023, which was the government before this government, Labor, who agreed to put in their 15, if the developer did what he was supposed to do. So it's all come together now. Now, Auckland Council, if they had their time again, and certainly Mayor Wayne Brown, if he had his time again, would not be doing it. He's of the view that he would never have committed to this money being spent from ratepayers. But now that the council and the government and the developer have met the conditions that everyone was waiting for, that it's the best way out of a bad situation for them to put it right and maybe revive that little segment of Auckland between the art gallery and the library and through across Queen Street to the Civic and the Aotea Centre and the Town Hall and the Q Theatre. They're calling it the Arts Precinct, which is very grand, but they're hoping to sort of kind of make it a zone.
Who's the developer? Who's the private party in this?
Stephen Bealby, and he is a former planner and developer elsewhere of heritage and standard buildings through a trust called the Auckland Notable Buildings Trust. But in this instance, the St James Trust is the actual sort of entity owning it. He's an interesting character. He's pushed away at this, and he's kind of been dogged. The St James Theatre building, which is old, was tied up with a demolished vacant site in front of it on Queen Street, which has been separately sold to a Korean developer who's to build a 40-storey apartment building. That has been put on the back burner for years because of the market, and now particularly people are saying, well, how are they ever going to build an apartment building in the current property market? But in the process, this developer of the St James has managed to separate off the St James project and that one completely, other than for one little entranceway that runs over the derelict site that'll bring people from Queen Street to the St James. That's still in play because it has a legal covenant and it has to happen. He's not promising a sort of gleaming, glitzy, fancy result in the end. He's saying that people have got to get used to the idea that it's going to be what he calls grandma with wrinkles in terms of things won't be perfect when they get it done.
Do people think it's worth it, and do we need another theatre?
The do we need another theatre is interesting because there's also Sky Theatre, there's the Auckland Theatre down at the Viaduct, and a lot of them are seeking some help as well because the business of theatres isn't so grand these days. The St James will be, I think, 900 seated and up to 1,800 standing for events or performances. The Civic is bigger, the Town Hall is bigger, the Aotea Centre is probably bigger. So it sort of fits in a bit of a niche, if you like. But, yeah, we'll have a precinct, all right, if this one goes through. One of the councillors who's worked away hard on this is Mike Lee, who's the Waitemata councillor. And he said he shouldn't have said this, but he said to me that even if in the end it's not used for much at all, it'll be worth it to having restored a grand old Auckland building. So he's not, even for him, it would just be great to have the heritage. I don't know that would get great support from others with the public purse.
That's it for today. The Detail is a newsroom production supported by RNZ and NZ On Air. Today's episode was produced by Alexia Russell and engineered by William Saunders. Thanks to David Reeves and Tim Murphy. I'm Sharon Brett Kelly. Ka kite.